Do we need to, Kim? Can we take the lights down a little bit? Is that possible? Girl, aren't you painted for these lights? Serena's gonna sit here. Okay, there we go.
If all of our speakers can come ahead to the stage.
That's a good point. Did we need this for this meeting? Or however many mics are there?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Lewis Raven Wallace, and I'm stepping in today to kind of MC and coordinate with press. So if you have follow-ups afterwards, you can find me directly. You can text me or email me. My information should be on the press release. Coordinating nationally, the organization GLAD and Barbara Simon will also be available for follow-up questions. And we're going to go ahead and hear from a few speakers and hopefully have time to take some questions, although we'll try to cut off right around 5. And then some of the speakers will be available afterwards for follow-up. So come to me at the end for that. Is our sound okay?
I would say yeah, and make sure when you're speaking, speak directly into the mic. Thank you. Louis, can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah.
Important to move forward so everybody's on the same line. Watch that even out with lighting.
And if we could ask everyone to silence your phones since we have cameras rolling. Thank you so much. And thanks for being masked as possible. So we are here today because on Saturday, this past Saturday, December the 3rd, in an odd but terrifying chain of events, the power grid was attacked in Moore County, North Carolina. And we know that this is not a coincidence or a one-off incident. There have been over 120 attacks on drag events in 2022 alone in the United States. North Carolina and Texas have been top areas that have been targeted. And there's currently an unsolved string of attacks on the power grid in the Pacific Northwest. At least 2 of those attacks bear similarities to what happened in North Carolina on Saturday. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce some of the folks you're going to hear from today. And ask each of you to just say your name, your pronouns, and the organization that you're with briefly, and then we'll kind of direct the conversation to share some story and some analysis and take questions. So I will hand it over. Let's just go down the line, starting with Naomi.
Hello, my name is Naomi Dix. I am a Durham, North Carolina native and a drag artist with the House of Cogs, and I also have participated in Drag Story Hour. And my pronouns or performance pronouns are she, her, hers.
I'm Lauren Mathers with Sandhills Pride. I'm the executive director, and my pronouns are she, her. Oh, here.
Let's move that mic between Courtney and Serena, please. Reposition it. Thank you.
Into that.
Good afternoon. My name is Serena Sebring. I'm Executive Director of Blueprint North Carolina. We are a coalition and capacity building organization supporting over 70 progressive nonprofit organizations across North Carolina.
My name is Courtney Patterson. I serve as the 3rd Vice President of the North Carolina State Conference of Branches of the NAACP and representing over 100 counties and branches in the state of North Carolina. I'm here instead of our president, Ms. Deborah Dix Maxwell.
Hi, I'm Rafi Pernsley. I use he, they pronouns. I am known as Stormy Day, drag queen of House of Cox. I am also a drag story hour reader, and representing the readers that have been going through a lot of the things that we'll be talking about today.
Thank you so much, Rafi. I think we're going to go ahead and start with you just giving a little more context about Drag Story Hour.
Drag Story Hour was started actually on the West Coast in 2015. This would be the year after I started personally organizing here in my home state of North Carolina as both a reader and LGBTQ Pride leader, specifically with Sandhills Pride. My first time being under assault by conservative groups would be as a drag queen in Burlington, North Carolina. Simply for the act of wanting to either read or perform for a community that gathered specifically for the purpose of pride. Since that time, I have experienced, along with other members of my community, performers like Alexandria Webb, my drag sister Naomi Dix, have been called many names online as well through social media, have been followed at events, and have either been asked to cease performing or have been blocked from spaces because of the work that we do. It's not lost on me that a lot of this work is being scrutinized because of the attention that we bring to trans children and queer families. And I would like to make a reading from a book that I think speaks to the work that we do. It's called We Move Together. It was written by Kelly Furch and Anne McGuire and Eduardo Trejo. And there is a line from the book that says, "Even when we're by ourselves, we never move alone. Like feeling so close with someone who's far, like learning from others who have come before. Their memories can ground us, soothe us, move us. This is not a new battle. This is not a new fight. This is not something new to our community." And I thank all of you here who are listening to the stories, struggles, and predicaments that many in my community have suffered recently.
Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Naomi and then Lauren to walk us through the order of events leading up to December 3rd.
Thank you. Yes, as I said, my name is Naomi Dix. I was the drag artist, producer, and headliner, and one of the organizers of the event on December 3rd that happened at Sunrise Theater in Southern Pines, Moore County. Leading up to the event, as soon as promotion hit, which was about 3 weeks prior to the event, we immediately started receiving a lot of negative energy and feedback from conservative community around Moore County and beyond, specifically from one person, Emily Grace Rainey, who was the leader in really pushing a lot of the aggressiveness towards myself, the performers, and also the anyone associated with the drag event, including Sunrise Theater, pushing for her team to go ahead and harass Sunrise Theater so that they could change the restriction from all ages to being 18 and plus. The narrative is that this event was specifically for adults and that it was adult entertainment and it was a sex show. She not only directed her attention towards Sunrise, but she also directed her attention towards me through DM, receiving hate mail, and a lot of negative things about me. As a result, we had a lot of forces against us at the time, and they eventually were able to get the Sunrise to, unfortunately, change the restriction, which added fuel to the fire and really played into the narrative that they were trying to push, that this was an adult event. Ultimately, they were trying to get the show canceled, but we stayed steadfast in that, and we were able to have the show on December 3rd. The day of the show, there was a protest, and there was a protest from both the opposing side as well as a peaceful demonstration that was held outside. The peaceful demonstration was led by some queer community leaders in the area and received about 200 people who were a part of that peaceful protest. On the other side, Emily Grace and her team were doing what they do best, which is just hurling a bunch of lies towards us. The show started at around 7:35. It started off with performances from an opening act, and then moved on to the drag portion, which I, as the host and headliner, opened up the show with a performance, and continued the show with performances until around, I would say, 8:05 maybe, and that is when the lights went out. I was notified by my assistant and by my security guard at the time that we had, that power had went out, and that the power in Moore County as a whole went out, and that we needed to think about possibly ending the show. I then went out onto the stage, and as you all have heard probably already, but I directed the audience to turn on their cell phone lights to illuminate the room with all 370 guests, and to ask for them to sing Halo by Beyonce with me to continue the show. We continued the show for about 45 minutes until I was, until the director and owner of Sunrise came up to me and asked me if I would like to either continue the show or stop. For the safety of the audience members, I asked for them to, I said that we should stop the show. I then went back up on stage, told them that you know, we are united and we are a united front, but for their safety, I would like for them to exit the building. They did that shortly after. We secured the building, and we, myself and the cast, packed up and left. And it wasn't until we left that I started getting the news of the power grids being shot at, and also that Emily Grace Rainey had made a statement on her social media that she was aware of why the power went out. I would just like also to say that, you know, this wasn't just an event that was leading up to the event was just not attacked by the opposite side, but there were also, we had security guards the entire time that we were there. We had snipers on the roof. We had security guards all around the building. We had police officers, plainclothes police officers on stage that were behind the curtains, and we also had personal security with us as well. These attacks were not just on me, but this was on a community in general. And this was also an attack on my entire cast, including anyone that was affiliated with us. So I just really want us to focus on the fact that this here and this press conference that we're having is not just to sit here and talk about some of the things that we can do, but also to really highlight the fact that this is to a bigger issue, which the queer, trans, and drag community as a whole is under attack right now, and that there are things that that really link up when it comes to those who were hurling attacks at us prior to this event and during the event as well.
Could someone get a tissue for my sister? Yes.
Tissue, anybody?
Tissues, anybody?
Tissue? We'll get it.
Maybe check the restroom.
We'll take care of it.
Thank you, beautiful people.
Thank you for that.
Lauren Mathers with Sandhills Pride. We were one of the two producers with the Sunrise Theater, and I first became aware of the pushback when I received a text message the day after we put the publicity up that from the Sunrise Theater saying that we're getting a lot of pushback, we're getting a lot of ugly messages. The next thing I knew, our sponsors were contacting me as well and saying the same thing. And the attack came in that manner, verbally instructing people to call and harass. And it got to the point where Everybody had to turn off their phones. They had to shut down their businesses. There were kids that were working in a shop that were getting harassment on the phone and being called vile names. All of the people who were performing equally received really threatening and difficult messaging. I had not experienced this before. We had done 3 previous performances with the same cast and Naomi as the headliner in public out in the middle of Southern Pines. So we had no expectation of that this would be difficult or that this would be unusual. We planned it exactly as we had before, including offering tickets for a student discount because we wanted to be inclusive. So when this hit, it hit hard, it hit fast, it was loud, it was scary. It took us 3 or 4 days just to sort of get back from reeling, and I know that Stormy and Naomi face this all the time, unfortunately, but it was a first for us. This was my first time of having this level of hate thrown at something that we loved so much. My organization partnered immediately with the Sunrise, and the decision was made at all levels that we would not cancel the show. We were not giving in to hate. So we moved forward. It was not easy, as Naomi said. We immediately started looking at security. We had to get in touch with the police, the fire, create a plan, and everything according to that plan went off incredibly. The people did show up, they did protest. Naomi went into the crowd of our supporters, and it was one of the most beautiful moments I'd ever seen because people were so loving and so giving and so supportive. And so we got into the theater with the idea that, okay, we can start the show now. And it took longer. We were a little late because of all of that. But as I was circulating through the lobby, there was nothing but love. There was nothing but support, gratefulness that we were able to do it, excitement to look forward to the show. We all went in, and as Naomi said, we were able to see one piece, basically, from each of our performers before we were waiting for the next piece. And I have a theater background, so I knew that the pause was a little too long. And the next thing I knew, there was no lights, and we were being told that it was the entire town. And eventually, as Naomi said, we ended up having to call the show for the safety of everyone involved. Hugely disappointed, very concerned for the safety. When I got home, that's when I found out by looking on my phone that in fact it was much bigger than we thought. It was overwhelming. As you all know, you've read the reports, we had 45,000 people in our community that ended up without power, and many of them seriously underserved, many of them part of the LGBTQ community. So our most vulnerable folks were even more vulnerable. Currently, we have people on the ground who are helping. There's been an incredible response positively. As hard as the negative was, we've been overwhelmed with beautiful comments, beautiful statements, beautiful love, contributions to both organizations to help us continue our work, and boots on the ground giving out food, water, supplies, blankets, coats for the people who are down there. And the power just came on to everybody towards the end of the day yesterday, so we're still assessing what next steps are.
Thank you, Lauren. And we'll go now to Courtney from the NAACP to talk a little bit more about the immediate impact in the local community.
Yes, we basically, I was down there the night before last, and people had, I was down there the night before last and experienced people basically who had lost food, food that had been in storage in their freezers are gone. It's just lost. They had no way of saving it. This long of an outage, the food just spoiled. Even food that they had for immediate use in their refrigerators, all spoiled. A stressful situation, another stressful situation that brought about more health challenges, both mental and physical. People are doing that. Children out of school who very badly, after COVID and all the experiences they've had, needed to be in schools. We had situations where there were several accidents because of electronic signals not working. And then just the whole mass of of all of the things that people just weren't accustomed to. And it happened right here at a time that is a season that people were preparing to be festive and to show, to show off, to put up their Christmas decorations or their holiday decorations and what have you. And it just made a sad event and a more stressful event for all of the people there. Elderly people who were some in assisted living, some people who were not even elderly but depended on things like oxygen and everything. It affected their lives as well.
Thank you, Courtney. And Serena, we're hoping that you can talk to us a little bit more about the broader context of this. We know that Emily, who Naomi mentioned, was connected in some way to the January 6th insurrection, connected to white supremacist groups, as well as to the Moore County Sheriff and to white supremacist organizing in Moore County. What else can you tell us about the context?
Yes, thanks so much. It's an honor to sit here in solidarity this afternoon. This is not staying. Just hold it. Blueprint, North Carolina. Thank you. Blueprint, North Carolina, as I mentioned, is a coalition of over 70 progressive nonprofit organizations across the state of North Carolina. Over a year ago, we began tracking and documenting the activities of folks like Emily Rainey and others in Moore County and surrounding areas because of their escalating white supremacist and far-right organizing, which is clearly a threat to all of our communities. This research led us to follow the context that then has unfolded over the last week. And I want to share some about that briefly with you here. I do have some copies. We put together an FAQ to really bring the context for what might seem like an isolated event that's unfolding right now. So we'll begin by addressing what actually happened at the power station in Moore County and what was the result. We've heard some of the after effects, including 40,000 people without power. 40,000 people without power means food in the refrigerator goes bad quickly, means that well pumps don't pump water, means that schools were closed and parents' workplaces were closed, means that people were hungry in Moore County for days because of this attack. And that is far beyond just the suffering and assaults that we've already heard detailed by people here on this stage. We know that began Saturday around 8 p.m. When a power outage was reported in the Carthage area, and then spread over the next several hours to central and southern Moore County, outages then cascading to the surrounding areas. Utility companies responded to 2 substations 10 miles apart at Carthage and West End, and they found evidence that one or more persons had inflicted intentional vandalism with gunfire to key portions of this facility, including big components that would be difficult and expensive to replace. This is a description of the facts of what happened and what caused these power outages. But what often has been left out of the media narratives that's been unfolding over the last several days is that much more than an act of vandalism, this is an act of domestic terrorism, and that when we don't name it as such, we don't respond with the right level of urgency to what has happened. The impact of this sabotage, this domestic terrorism, was that 63.7% of the county's electric customers, or over 40,000 separate accounts, lost power as of 10:30 p.m. on Saturday. These power outages spilled over beyond even just Moore County into surrounding areas, including Hope County and Richmond County, where we have also heard from our partners and from our neighbors that they too were not only just without power, but also without cell phone signal for days as a result of this domestic terrorism. The question then becomes, what did this act of sabotage have to do with the drag show that has been described? And we are aware that authorities are saying that they have no suspects, that they have no motives for this sabotage yet. But it is very hard for people of good conscience and sound judgment to ignore the immediate context that there was a virulent right-wing attack on this drag show that unfolded over days and weeks beforehand, and that at the center of this is a continuation of a pattern of anti-LGBTQ attacks that is not only unfolding in North Carolina, but nationally and escalating. It is critical that we name this for what it is. Why are people talking about militia or far-right actors in sabotage? Even though law enforcement continue to urge caution in jumping to conclusions, and no one is suggesting that we jump to conclusions, we do have to go back to the fact that this is a pattern of violence against energy substations that dates back to 2013, and for which there has been very little, if any, legal accountability for this pattern of domestic terrorism. In addition to Emily Rainey, who's been named, and who on the night in question did post online that she knew why the power was out in Moore County and why. In addition to her, there are also others that we have been tracking. In fact, we have learned that Emily Rainey took over a busload of residents from Moore County up to the Capitol insurrection on January 6th. That those North Carolinians came back down, continued organizing, and are to this date a threat to not only democracy but safety in our state. Rainey, though she was the most outspoken organizer, is not the only one. And we know, because evidence has emerged since, that these are not distant forces from law enforcement in Moore County. We have seen clear evidence of relationship between the Moore County Sheriff, these extremist factions, and it is not unnoticed that these charges have not been filed, that there has been no formal investigation beyond prayers, and that the community remains at risk without an answer to who caused this. Many residents responded saying that they felt concerned about why Moore County. Why would Moore County be targeted by such an attack? But the pattern, not only of escalation in terms of these substations, in terms of the white supremacist and right-wing organizing of Emily Rainey and others in Moore County, as well as what appears to be an under-response to this situation. You know, Courtney and I, we were in Moore County delivering food, delivering generators the other day, and who we did not see was a response, an emergency response at the scale that would make sense given an attack of domestic terrorism within our community. We saw streetlights that were out, no one directing traffic. We did not see large bodies responding, though we understand the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are investigating. To the county, to the residents of Moore County, to our neighbors, to our community members of LGBTQ identification, and many more who are not LGBTQ identified, we have questions about how it is that days later we still find no answers, no protection, and no safety on the other side of this attack. We recognize and name that this, in total, is part of a pattern that seeks to remove LGBTQ people from public life, that targets drag shows and our precious spaces like LGBTQ bars as gathering spaces, that it targets us as pedophiles, that it seeks to put us back into the closet where we will not go. where we will not go. And we have to wonder if LGBTQ people were not the target of this attack, how would our response look different right now? And I think that we should all ask that question of our elected officials. I don't think that people of good conscience across difference, and I mean, there were 40,000 people out of power in Moore County, mostly not LGBTQ. We all pay. Every member of our community bears the cost of homophobia and transphobia unchecked. And Moore County is an example and ought to be a cautionary tale about what happens when we allow bigotry to flourish and when people of good conscience don't speak up. I think it's critical that we recognize that what we are in right now is a which side are you on moment. That is the moment, and that we ask not only our elected officials, but our neighbors to stand with us and recognize both the scope of the threat that we face from white supremacists who have not been held accountable for these attacks and are not being held accountable right now. It is critical that we decide that we are on the people's side. People who would like to keep heat on, people who would like to have water in our homes and food in our refrigerators, and safe communities must address the threat that is. And we know that that begins by listening to the harm that has happened and by celebrating the courage of those who stick their necks out to bring joy, to bring community to spaces. And so it is our honor to stand with you, Naomi, to stand with Sandhills Pride, and to say that for all of us as progressive North Carolinians, we do not abide this as an answer to what is okay in our state. We do not stand by idly, and we will not go back into the closet. Thank you.
So a couple of action items. Some of the folks here are collecting donations of shelf-stable food for people in Moore County, and that can be done where? In the back. Raise your hand if you're collecting. All right, there's a bin by the door for that. And I want to just ask if anyone on the stage has anything to add before we take questions from reporters.
I just would like to say really quickly that this was a moment for us to be able to tell our story. This is not just my story, this is everyone's story. Also at the same time, though media has asked many questions and has done many stories and has done put out a lot of things regarding this event, what the media has failed to do is to be able to highlight the fact that we as drag artists are human beings and that we are real people, and also at the same time that we have a story to tell, and we have been doing this long before this even happened. This is something that we've been doing. I know I myself have been doing this for over almost 10 years. I know Stormy has been doing this for 10 years or more at this point. This was a moment for us not to necessarily focus on people who want to be famous or people who want to have the clicks and the follows, and people who want to use children as for their hidden agenda, and to blame drag artists for that, or queer people as a whole for that. So you all can sit here and you can act like you're bored, or you've heard this before, or I've already asked these questions before, or we've already seen this on the news. You're right, you have seen it on the news. You can Google it. As I would say, Google me, okay? But the point is that we have more of a story to tell, and at this point, this is clearly an attack on queer people as a whole. And I need for you to understand that. I mean, how would you like it if somebody asked you to choose between your job or not having one? How would you like it if somebody asked you to choose between wearing a suit versus being naked outside? I mean, of course you're not gonna wanna be naked outside unless you're one of those people, right? But how would you like it if someone asked you and forced you to choose? You wouldn't like that. We as human beings, we as just people in general, we like to have options. We also at the same time like to have the freedom to be able to choose ourselves. Why? Because that is just a part of who we are. We live in America, that is who we are. And so for me to have to be forced to choose, or for a next generation after me to be forced to choose, those are the real groomers who are forcing them to choose. I am not a groomer.
Say that.
So to provide space and to deprive people from that space so that they can in turn be what you want them to be or what you think that they should be, that is a quintessential, or for me, that is the definition to a groomer. So for me, what I would have to say to this situation is that for a long time, you sit here and you say, well, I'm protecting my community from these children. I'm protecting this quaint, community that is in Southern Pines, that is, quiet, and we have shops and we have boutiques and we are a Christian community. I'm protecting my community. But potentially, this is what you do to protect your community, to have 40,000 people without power, and to have people who have lost their lives because of it. That's what you call protecting your community. When drag queens came into your community to actually allow your children to have the freedom of choice of speech, and to have your children have the freedom to be able to be who they want to be. That is my job. And so again, sit here, act like you're bored, act like you've heard this before. But this is not just something that has come from me. This is something that has come from everybody sitting in this room. If you have children, this is talking about your children, because this is talking about their potential future. And it doesn't matter if you're white, if you're black, if you're Latino, if you're Asian, this is you as well.
Thank you, Naomi.
Yes. I do have copies of the frequently asked questions that I read from. So if anybody would like more information about the research we've been doing and more, I have those available. In terms of next steps, it's my understanding that we will continue to convene for planning about readiness in our hubs, and get ready for what we know is a season to come, looking forward, where we have to prepare for risks such as these as we look forward to 2024 as an election, and towards what we will do as a people in the face of an escalating threat.
Thank you, Serena. And we'll go ahead and take questions from press.
I'll take the first question. The People's Dot, independent reporter. Can you speak about 2024 implications in relation to power grid attacks and some of the practices, the dry runs that have been happening? Even this week, there have been two more power grid attacks throughout the country. There have been several dozen this year. How could this play out in 2024?
I'm going to send that to you, Serena. The question was about the implications for 2024 of power grid attacks like this one.
Yes. So I think it's important to name the most obvious potential impact, which is that our elections rely on power to run. So I think that if we are looking at the field of election protection in a time of extremism, in a time of election denial, and in a moment when the interests of far-right white supremacist organizers who have been testing this method since 2013, we ought to be very concerned about keeping the power on in 2024 if we want to protect democracy.
Can you speak to whether you have been contacted by the FBI or the SBI? They're saying that a lot of the information they are trying to hold close to the vest right now because they don't want to jeopardize the investigation. Can you speak to whether you've been contacted by them? And yeah, that's my question.
So I want to say folks on the stage may not be able to speak to that.
I have not been contacted.
Lauren, have you?
But if the FBI won't release the information, then it wouldn't make any sense for anyone else to do it.
You mentioned some ties to white supremacy and sheriff. Is that correct?
Specifically, I was referring to ties between the sheriff of Moore County and Emily Rainey. There have been pictures that have been circulated online, which indicate at a minimum some relationship, so that's what I was referring to.
Just right now, at this time, law enforcement said everything is on the table. They haven't made the connection yet of if it's connected to this. They haven't ruled it out. What makes you definitively say this attack was connected to the show?
Well, I think it's not, you know, I'm an organizer. I'm not a law enforcement. So some of those connections would need to be made by them, of course, but I am a person in community, and I think that we all, you know, have the ability to note that these things at a minimum happened at the same time. At a minimum, we had a hotly contested disagreement in community about the existence of a drag show that did escalate to threats of violence that have been clearly documented, and then an act of violence happened. So I think that the sequence of events at a minimum should call for the most thorough investigation into what those events have to do specifically with each other, and it seems very early to say they could find none.
I would like to add that the North Carolina State Conference of the NAACP stand with the LGBTQ community, as well as Naomi. We also stand with the Moore County NAACP, and we plan using all of the state and national resources to encourage and to hold law enforcement accountable, and to make sure that they definitely investigate this for what it really is.
I would also like to add that rarely do we see 4-H events, festivals, Christmas parades threatened by gun violence, that there is a continuous history from drag readers, drag queen performers, as Serena said, nationally, where gun violence is either threatened online or threatened in person, and that there doesn't seem to be a response from authorities to take those threats seriously on the ground.
Hi, yeah. I mean, I'd love to hear, particularly from the two performers on stage, do y'all have, you know, I'm sure there's so many parents and kids right now that are really scared by what happened in Moore County. Do y'all have any message that you want to send to them in particular?
I would like to say that the organizers of Drag Story Hour have been working diligently behind the scenes to ensure that occasions in which we gather are safe through the use of community organizing, not unlike Blueprint, not unlike the community that is here today that many of you online cannot see, that we have a community that's coming together to protect itself, no different than the community that comes together to put on events for ourselves, that we gather for ourselves, we protect ourselves, and that understandably families would be concerned, but we are doing the work as volunteers through community centers, through community organizations to protect people and keep people safe. There are different ways in which we are going about advertising and sharing about these events. We do not want people to not feel safe. Unfortunately, as Naomi said, we live in America, and the threat of gun violence in the face of children is unfortunately a reality we live with every day.
Just to echo, I'm sorry, do you have a name or?
Oh, yeah, I'm Sarah, I work with the News and Observer.
Okay, News and Observer, thank you so much. Just to echo what my drag sister said, yeah, there are organizers and there are just community members that are wanting to really put together just a space in which they can go ahead and reach or have outreach to community to be able to protect these different queer events, specifically Drag Story Hour, and just drag shows in general, so that they can just protect those events and protect the performers and those in their audience who are attending the event. I know that there is right now a new group that is called Performer, let me hold on 1 second. I actually have their information right here. They are called Performer Advocacy Coalition. They have some people in Raleigh, North Carolina. They are calling themselves PAC. And they are looking to provide services to local areas and drag performers, queer performers, queer events, and are wanting to work with communities. So there are things that are happening behind the scenes. This is not something that is just standing still. And one thing that I do want to make sure that I mention is that what I have seen is that the community is making sure that this is not something 6 months down the road that we're saying, oh, do you remember that? No, we're making sure that we really push this and bring light to this situation, because this is, again, to a larger issue that is happening that we can't allow to just be swept under the rug, including when it comes to the response of some officials in Moore County.
Thank you.
And we have a question in the back, and if reporters can identify your name and who you work for.
Yes, hi, I'm Hannah Schoenbaum from the Associated Press. I'm hoping that our drag queens and anyone else up here can speak specifically to the concerns and fears for queer people living in rural spaces. What keeps you guys coming back to these communities, doing events in spaces that are not just maybe scary for you to perform in, but also an added fear for people living in those rural communities and spaces without maybe a major queer presence?
Sure. I mean, that is, thank you for your question. That is our job, that is our position as performers, specifically as drag performers. Our job is to facilitate, as I always say, facilitate and create safe spaces. Specifically when it comes to areas such as Moore County and dealing with this situation here, Southern Pines, is to find these areas in which there isn't great representation of the queer community, and to provide them with art and a space in which they can feel safe and feel that they are able to express themselves and see that representation of just queerness. So that's why we will continuously keep going to areas like this, and that when it comes to Moore County, when it comes to Southern Pines, this is not our only time that we will be there. First of all, we had 4 other events again prior to that in Southern Pines. It was nothing new to the area. And I, as a facilitator in that community, will continuously keep bringing drag entertainment, drag performers, and queer space to Southern Pines and other areas like it.
If I may, there are also LGBTQ people in rural areas and in Moore County, and I think that it's important not to overlook that there is no difference between an LGBTQ community and a rural community. We are everywhere.
Can we hear from Laura, please?
Yes, please, thank you. I've been in touch with my parents and my kids, who, by the way, were all out volunteering with the NAACP down in Southern Pines to make sure that folks had food. But what I really am concerned about is the mental health issue of our kids. Kids in rural communities don't necessarily always have the same level of support. They don't necessarily have a GSA organization in their schools, certainly not in middle school. And what I hear from my kids is that there's constant bullying, there's constant abuse. It's not always stopped by the people who have the authority, so these children are being messaged that not only are they not valuable, but what they're being told is true. And so within my organization, one of the most important things that we try to do is we don't have a space, we don't have a center, we don't have a place that we can say you can come here. It is always an effort to create and find partnerships within our community so that we can create those safe spaces. And we have a number of partners who are very, very supportive. So I want to clarify a couple things. One is, yes, we're everywhere. You know, we're in the Robbins, we're in downtown Southern Pines, and I'm a resident of Southern Pines, and I do love my town. But it is very difficult sometimes to find the support that is willing to stand up. In the rural areas, the support and the presence is much quieter. Everybody wants to just stay in their house, stay safe, and I understand that. But until the people who are both part of our community as the LGBT community and our allies start standing up and saying, no, we're not gonna have this, we're gonna take care of our kids, we're gonna take care of our vulnerable populations, we're gonna continue to see mental health issues that are alarming and results for our kids that are alarming. And these folks are going to be the adults. They're going to be in charge of this world one day. And I want them to know and be prepared for the actual world that we're living in, and not for some fictional version of it where we don't exist. Representation is so important for these kids and for these parents. We have a parents group, we have a kids group, and it is full. And they have questions and they need support. So I thank you for that.
I'd like to ask Naomi to speak to your story about not the level of mutual aid that you and other folks in the drag community have done this past week to take material goods back into the county. You would be very justified in never going to again. What all you've taken, how you distributed it, where you got it from here, like why you did that, and what your commitment has been ongoing to the people.
Sure. Yes. Thank you for your question. Also, at the same time, you're right. It could have been a situation where I was done with a bunch of white people in Southern Pines who didn't like me. Pretty much. I could have been done with that. One, it gives me more ammunition. The more hate I get, the more ammunition I have to go back and to make sure, as Lauren was saying, that the children that they say that they are trying to protect are actually protected and actually have a space and a voice. But to your question specifically, what I have done and what other drag performers have done in this area is worked with community members within the Moore County area to make sure that we put together drop-off locations in this area, Durham, Raleigh, Chapel Hill, and Carterboro, to collect items that are needed for the community of Moore County, and that we go ahead and we set up organizers who are able to pick up those items and deliver those items to Moore County as well. We also have an event that we are planning for this Saturday to offer in Moore County, Southern Pines specifically, but to be able to have the community come together and offer food and mental health therapy and access to mental health to people in the area. Because again, this is a situation in which not only are people just affected by not having power, but people also are affected mentally, and they need to be able to have access to that. So as a community leader myself, I'm just making sure that that was not the only time that I showed my face in Southern Pines, and that wasn't the only time that I show my face anywhere, which is to give entertainment to community, but also living what I preach, which is to make sure that I provide that safe space. A part of providing that safe space is making sure that I work with the community to make sure that they are safe, but that they also have items that they need in this time of need as well. And we are working on other things behind the scene. I don't really want to mention them right now because they are in the early stages of being organized, but again, this is a continuous effort that I have, that I know that my drag sister has, and the community, the queer community at large, and the drag community. We are using our platforms to look better than just looking good in a wig and some heels. We are actually using our platform to make sure that we provide space and we provide relief in a time of need.
We have time for 2 more questions. Do you have a question, Kim?
Oh no, I was saying,
Yeah.
Right here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Alicia Brown, the reporter at Facing South. I have a question for Rafi. Rafi, I know that you perform as Stormy Day, and this summer you were set to perform at the North Carolina Museum of Art Drag Queen Story Hour event, which was canceled after it was publicly attacked essentially by right-wing operative Christopher Rucco of the Manhattan Institute. So how did you move forward after that attack and that onslaught of online hate?
Unfortunately, that is a bit of fake news. We did not have a reading planned at that time, but because of the work that I do through Drag Story Hour, that information was used to create an event to harass the North Carolina Museum of Art by people who agreed with conservative mindsets that said I should not be reading at that space because of public funding, and as a queer person, they were pushing an agenda. They ran with that story to promote and incite violence against myself and other Drag Story Hour readers online. As I mentioned, Alexandria Webb, whose public information and personal work information were posted online after the press from that story released. Members of the organizer, head organizer of Drag Story Hour, had to do a lot of work actually to clarify that that event was not actually planned, and that many from that community used that as a way to claim success over LGBTQ events and a successful protest that stopped an event, and it did not actually happen. But to my point earlier, that this is a continued attack, that Moore County is not an isolated event, that these things are ramping up, that we as performers have been under attack again since this summer, where we have had to either organize with community members for extra security or extra protection, or move events to different spaces, or even cancel some events, unfortunately. And when we are talking about the authorities at large, the media not putting all of the information out there, this is what we're speaking of, that there are similar styles of attacks where they start online and then they move to the ground and they affect people in real time. And we want it to be known that this is not anything new, that we are continuing to see people come up against us organizing or gathering or wanting to share amongst each other as community. And we are, as much as we want to do by ourselves, we need people to honestly report honestly and share information like this. And when things like this do come out, that we share the whole truth and share everything and talk to the people who are affected. Because as I'm now clarifying, that was one of the things that happened that unfortunately we didn't have an event planned, but they used that information to organize, gather, and promote their agenda against us.
So we have one more minute, and we're going to take another question here.
Context matters here. Those on the panel have the experience. Can you speak to the connection between the white supremacist organizing that we see now in Moore County and, say, what was happening in Ferguson several years ago, what was happening in Baltimore? Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, colluding with police and then practicing some of the things that we're seeing now back then and bringing it forward.
The trajectory of a consolidated far-right extremist and white supremacist organizing pocket has been, as you asked, has been gathering steam for the last several years. We've seen an even more dramatic escalation of that over the course of the last year, as we see events like this, like the attack on Pride over the summer, where we saw a truckload of white supremacists lined up in militia gear. We are seeing that there is an intersectional far right as well as an intersectional left. The intersectional right is full of overlapping relationships between people who are violently anti-abortion and people who are terrorizing communities through the use of paramilitary training centers in southeastern North Carolina in particular. And it's really emboldened by connections to the mainstream right wing in our country, and by a growing tolerance for a level of extremism and violence. And so I think since the times that you've named, all we have seen is more normalization of that hate. And this context, I think, is one in which we have yet another chance to say, this is not the world that we choose. This is not the North Carolina that we choose, and that we will come together across difference, that it won't be just those people who are subject to direct attacks that say we are impacted by the growth of an extremist organizing front in North Carolina, as well as in the country.
Thank you so much to the speakers, and thanks for being here, everybody. Thank you to the Pinhook for having us here.
If we can just make sure to exit, not stand around too long, that would be great. If you have any questions, we can answer that up towards to the front of the Pinhook, but we do need to exit rather quickly.
Oh, I drift with the wind. No one cares where I go.